Hi everyone, my name is Kiana Randall and I am the Team 1 summarizer for Against the Sophists. So let's talk about Against the Sophists and why it was written. So Against the Sophists was a tractate written in 390 by one of the most regarded influential rhetoricians of all time, Isocrates. So Isocrates wrote against the Sophists with the intentions of separating himself from other Sophists because at the time that Against the Sophists was written, Isocrates had launched his own education doctrine and he wanted to separate his personal education doctrine from those that also practice Sophism because at this time Sophists were seen throughout Greece as dishonorable and deceitful, and they just did not have a good track record, and people were beginning to get mistrusting. So he wanted to separate himself because he didn't want to be associated with the typical norm for Sophism. So let's talk about who were the Sophists. Who were these people that were being shady and dishonorable and not being trustworthy? So in ancient Greece, the Sophists were a group of men who taught philosophy and rhetoric. If you don't know, I thought this would be super cool to put in here. Sophist is Greek for wisdom. If you did know that, drop in the comments that you knew that. So they didn't believe that gods influence human actions, and they even accepted money for their teachings, even if they weren't always quote unquote accurate, and they definitely were not well respected throughout Greece. So let's talk about why Socrates was against the Sophists because he has to have a reason that he's so against them that he would write an entire piece of work that goes against Sophism. And this was very, very controversial at the time because he just didn't go against Sophists, especially the way that he came about them strongly. So Socrates is against Sophists due to their lack of education and the scope of their teachings. He thinks that they teach things that they themselves lack and they teach about wisdom that they don't possess. He considers what we would call false teachers or hypocrites. So let's talk about his first argument that he immediately starts his piece of work with. He immediately starts to call out their contradiction. He's saying that they're contradictive in their teachings and that they're contradictory people. They're hypocrites. They teach virtues that they themselves don't hold or possess. He says they'll teach about truth and about happiness and about justice, but they don't practice truth, happiness, and justice themselves. The next thing that he comes for them about is he wants everyone to know that Sophists don't know it all like they claim to. So at this time, Sophists were leading people in Greece to believe that only they have the wisdom to teach men and that they must study under them and them only to have the knowledge to become happy and prosperous. So if you were a student in Greece at this time, you were led to believe that you had to learn under Sophists because if you didn't, then you weren't actually learning and that your life would not reach its full maximum potential that it could. So Socrates disagreed with this because he believed that it's crucial for students to think for themselves rather than to fail students with the answer. So I put this picture of a thinking cap with the girl with the light bulb on to just symbolize thinking for yourself and that learning, that there's power in your own individual learning. And this is also symbolic because Socrates did believe that it's crucial for students to learn for themselves. It's crucial for us as people now to even learn for ourselves because at this time people were taking what sophists were saying and they were running with it to be true. But we should always be learning for ourselves and make sure that we're verifying what we're getting taught. So I really like that he discussed this in Against the Sophists. The next thing he talked about was their invaluable teachings. So sophists were claiming that their teachings were invaluable and that there is no price that they could ever put on their teaching, yet they were charging students 3 or 4 minutes. When Isocrates was writing this in Against the Sophists, he was talking about them like they were scammers and money seekers, and he felt like why would they charge or place a value on things that are invaluable teachings? And I thought this was really important to highlight. Also, this is what money would have looked like at this time. So, his fourth argument was that sophists were mistrusting. Isocrates highlighted the fact that sophists were mistrusting of their students because they required students to pay upfront for their education. There were no loans, there was no payment plans. Everyone had to pay any sophist for their teachings up front and 100% full. And he believed that if they were truly capable of their teachings and that their teachings were accurate, that they would be so confident that they felt like they didn't need to charge up front. So I thought that was a very crucial argument that Socrates was highlighting because it just goes to show their contradiction and their dishonorable reputation. If they had an honorable reputation at this time, they also probably wouldn't have need to charge up front. His fifth argument was their false teachings. So he argued that the Sophists thought, though they were teachers that taught subjects, they didn't even have the knowledge in rhetoric and oratory themselves. And he believed because of their lack of knowledge, this made them false teachers due to not able to correctly teach a subject that they're ignorant in. So they were basically teaching things that they were full of ignorance in. It's just like if a reading teacher teaches you math or a science teacher teaches you history, they were not educated in the subjects that they were teaching in. And he argued this because he also felt like they had a lack of respect for the arts because he felt like if they're going to teach it, why don't they have respect enough to learn about the arts? His sixth argument was a dislike for the technique. So in our writing process now, we have universal rules rather than all these like little bitty strict rules. And we can even thank Socrates for this because in Against the Sophists, he really truly emphasized how he did not like the technique that was pushed. The Sophists were wanting to have all of these confining and restrictive rules instead of just having the universal rules that went throughout the whole entire creative process. And he felt like those rules were stopping people from being able to be creative in their writing and that it was in a way controlling them in their writing. So I put this image of the creative process because our creative process is truly creative and it's not confiding. It's more so universal rules like brainstorming, and also like our writing structure is not as confining. We have, a standard of universal rules throughout our English. The next argument is number 7, which is ruining the reputation. So Socrates felt like due to their lack of knowledge and the contradiction that ran rapid amongst the Sophists, this made them to be dishonorable. And because of their false teachings, their contradiction, charging money up front, he felt like the Sophists were making it more difficult for those Sophists that were actually true and genuine in their teachings. It was harder for actual Sophists or for just even regular teachers at that time to be able to teach because everybody was assuming that they were going to be like the Sophists and that their reputation was so bad that people just weren't wanting to trust them to learn. So that is the end of Socrates' arguments. I thought that this reading assignment was really good because it allows you to see all of the things that were happening throughout Greece at the time that the Sophists were practicing Sophism, and it also shows that Socrates cared a lot about his work. He cared a lot about the future of learning and education because he spoke up against the dishonorable things that were happening, and Socrates really changed the world at that time for English and rhetoric and oratory in the subjects and even teaching styles now. In Against the Sophists was the blueprint that got it was the blueprint that kicked off the change that came after Against the Sophists. So I thank you all for listening and I hope you enjoyed my summary.